Good afternoon to everyone. I guess we're going to start, and I'm happy to welcome you at our regular meeting on monitoring the implementation of the IMF program and EU assistance. Interpretation into English is available, so if somebody has any questions, please. So
you can switch to English one on the button on interpretation. But currently our event will be in Ukrainian. But if you have any questions, you can ask them in Q&A or chat or raise the voice after the presentations.
So I'm switching back to Ukrainian. If you have any questions, you can ask them in the chat box in the Q&A section, or you can raise your hand and ask them verbally. A few words about our consortium. We have our RA4U consortium. We've been functioning for more than 2 years. This is a union of 4 organizations. Center for Economic Strategy, Institute of Analytics and Advocacy, Institute for Economic Research and Policy Consulting, and DiXi Group. And our job is to advocate Ukraine's interests abroad, and our major goal is to monitor the EU assistance and IMF program. We think that the public monitoring, civil monitoring, is very useful because it's independent and transparent, and it helps to track how the government meets its obligations. And international commitments of Ukraine are about trust and money, first of all, because our partners provide financial aid to Ukraine based on certain financial requests and certain conditions. Today we're going to speak about how we are fulfilling IMF program, what is ahead, how Ukraine's plan is being implemented, and how EU assistance is being done. Still, we need to remind that the fiscal gap remains very big. As you know, the government decided to increase taxes to fill in this gap, and we will talk about this. Our activities in terms of monitoring is and other activities are funded by International Renaissance Foundation, which we're grateful to. And from this welcome speech, I would like to switch to the presentation, and let me invite and give the floor to Vyacheslav Kurylo, the Director of Institute of Analytics and Advocacy, who will briefly inform us on what is happening. Over to you. Thank you. Can you see the slides? Yes, we can. So I think for our listeners, for our participants, and for those who regularly takes part in our monitoring meetings, will be not surprising that we've gone through the 4th review as a part of IMF program and received the 5th tranche amounting to $2.2 billion. And actually, we have been working with IMF for a while, and for the country at war, this is a very positive moment. And this demonstrates that our reliable partner, which is ready to take commitments and meet these commitments. So before the 4th review, we were supposed to implement 3 structural benchmarks, 5, 7, 9, to support small and medium businesses, which we successfully implemented. Another structural benchmark was about making amendments to the legislation to enable to consider cases in the High Anti-Corruption Court. This was also implemented with a slight delay. And the last benchmark was related to auditing the status of TEPL Ukrenergo. After the review was done, the memorandum was published, which included 2 important new structural benchmarks. Today we speak a lot about customs service, and now there are new discussions about its operation, about how much we lose due to unsatisfactory operation of the service, how to increase the activeness of the customs service. Therefore, the reform of the customs service is one of the main benchmarks, which should be completed by the end of October 2024. Another important benchmark is cancellation of the Lozovi amendments and other changes to the criminal code. This issue is quite well known, and previously we managed to cancel these amendments only partly because there was the whole range of them. And this structural benchmark is aimed at removing all these amendments from the law, and it should be completed by the end of October 2024. The deadlines for the implementation of 3 structural benchmarks have been postponed. This is about tax benefits at losses, which was postponed from July 2024. Another one was to determine the state companies most affected by the war. And the last one was to complete an external audit of NABU's effectiveness. This is quite a serious benchmark, and we postponed it from end of June to end of July. There is the draft bill, which was nevertheless not registered in the parliament. The next review is planned for September-October 2024. In terms of structural benchmarks, we've almost completed our homework, and in June 2024, the law on ESB reload was adopted. However, there are certain quantitative effectiveness criteria and goals, and due to the uncertain conditions and the problems with the budget income, budget revenues, due to all these facts, we're most likely to have the problem with meeting these requirements. By the end of September, we're going to complete 3 structural benchmarks: tax benefits and losses, the most affected state companies, state-owned companies, and fiscal risks and quasi-fiscal risks, and to complete the external audit with 3 independent international experts with subsequent report on that. In case the 5th revision, the 5th review is successful, this can yield in a little bit more than $1 billion. The 6th review is scheduled for the end of December, and if it's successful, we will again have a little bit more than $1 billion. I would like also to note that we, as an analytical center, which is directly related to the expenditure chamber, the Ukrainian party assumed the commitment. This is a non-structural benchmark, but nevertheless, the Ukrainian party promised by December 2024 to adopt the law which will increase independence, authority, and efficiency of the chamber. Therefore, we hope this benchmark will be reached and the chamber will work more efficiently, which is also is the requirement of our international partners. In terms of detailed status of the benchmarks, you can see them in our presentation, which will be shared after the meeting. And in general, here we can see the map of the structural benchmarks implementation after the 4th review. This is all from my side. Thank you. Thank you very much, Vyacheslav. I would like to highlight, you've seen the dates. Ukraine is completing certain benchmarks, but not on time. And for us to be able to get funds in the future and to reach these goals on time, we need the government to work better on the reforms without delaying the deadlines. Because, as you could see from the Ukraine's plan, as a part of Ukraine's facility, certain benchmarks and certain decisions were made in the last day of a month. And at this, I would like to give the floor to Alona Korotko, who is representing DiXi Group. Thank you, colleagues. Thank you. The center. Let me share my screen. If you see everything. Yes, we do. That's great. So, to help Ukraine in terms of recovery, restoration, etc., European Union continues to provide assistance as a part of Ukraine's facility. Last month, we said that in Q2, certain indicators should be reached, and the Ministry of Economics informed that Ukraine has had undertaken all the necessary actions to meet these indicators in Q2, which are provided for the plan. And on July 9th, sent a corresponding request for 4.2 billion euros to the European Commission. And the European Commission supported allocation of these funds. And on the 24th of July, EU ambassadors agreed on the first tranche to provide almost 4.2 billion euros. And the funds can be expected in September as the latest. With regard to other commitments for Ukraine facility, during Q3, we are supposed to implement 9 indicators, which will enable us to get 4.2 billion euros, and 1.5 billions are the grant financing. So in total, in 2024, we're expecting to receive 16 billion euros. Of them, 3 billion will be in the form of a grant. So we've analyzed the implementation of the indicators of the plan for Q2. And as you can see on the slide, you can see the data for the 6 months. Regarding Q3 2024, in terms of anti-corruption and money laundering, we have 3 indicators. As of July, one of them has been reached. In terms of the appointment of specialized anti-corruption prosecutor's office. This is also included. And also we're anticipating the certain activities for implementation of the strategy for this year. In terms of business environment and human capital, the fulfillment of the indicators is in progress. We're expecting the approval of the comprehensive strategy by 2040. The draft strategy has been developed, and we're expecting also deregulation activities approval. In terms of energy and green transition and environmental protection, as of end of July, the terms of reference preparation is still in progress. And after it's developed, the indicator will be deemed as completed. Also, there is another indicator on the law on industrial pollution. It's at the final stage of implementation. On 16th of July, the law was adopted, and on the 23rd of July, it was submitted to the president for signature. With regard to the development of the concept note, in the end of April 2024, the draft concept note was published for discussion, and thus the implementation of this indicator was initiated. And finally, in terms of decentralization and regional policy, we're expecting the law to be put into force on the strategy of regional development for till 2027. There is the resolution of the Cabinet of Ministers, so we're expecting this law to be adopted. In terms of further monitoring, please follow us, and we will provide you with updated information. Thank you. Thank you very much. In our presentation, there are more than 100 slides for each reform mentioned by Vyacheslav and Alena. We have one or two slides depending on the reform each. Speaking about IMF, the number of the reform is related to the IMF memorandum. When we're talking about EU program, the information is based on the quarters, quarter 1, 2, 3. So the table provided by Aliona will help you to find the relevant information. So please go through our presentation. And also would like to note that in terms within Ukraine facility, we implement only the indicators which enable us to have budgetary support because in the Ukraine facility, there are several pillars. For instance, investment component, investment pillar, or technical assistance, or funding the loan interest rates. We are not considering this right now. And the amount which was mentioned is really needed for us because the tax revenue in Ukraine is insufficient, and they're directed only to defense. All other expenditures are funded by our partners. Therefore, we need to meet our commitments so that this assistance was timely. And I would ask Maxim to tell us if we have enough assistance for this year. Maxim Soboluk, the Center for Economic Strategy. Thank you, Alexandra. Welcome, everyone. Let me share the screen. And the ever relevant question, are we going to close the fiscal gap this year or next year? We discussed that at the previous monitoring meetings when we were talking about IMF benchmarks and the Ukraine facility. However, over the past month, certain significant developments have taken place. First of all, let's look at the situation for this year. What's happening in terms of the fiscal gap in 2024. The basic message is we need more funds to finance defense. Alexandra has already mentioned that all civil expenses are provided by our international partners. This is true, and it's important for us to meet all the requirements, for us to be able to get these funds on time. And for 2024, for civil expenditures, basically the need will be covered according to the estimates. According to the Ministry of Finance, Ukraine needs about $37 billion in terms of external funding. National Bank of Ukraine, NBU, estimates that Ukraine will receive 38 billion this year of foreign budget aid. Of course, this is not enough for Ukraine to be able to plan its budgetary process adequately. However, over the past month, the situation has been improving. And most important is that Ukraine has agreed on receiving the first tranche from the United States grant. This is 3.9 billion out of $7.85 billion via World Bank. This has been quite a long story. As you all remember, that the Congress was thinking for a while about the conditions, about the amounts of aid, and for several months we did not receive these funds, and we still don't. But now we understand that we will have these funds here in Ukraine, and we have more confidence that the second tranche and maybe the third one will cover this amount. Also, Ukraine has agreed about the first tranche, 4.2 billion euros for the first quarter 2024 under Ukraine's plan, and therefore we can say that with civil expenditures, the situation is not simple, but there is certain positive trend. The second half of the national budget is defense expenditures, and here the situation is much more complicated. Now we're lacking funds to fund the defense from Russian aggression. And to improve the situation, the government proposed to increase the expenditures for defense by almost 500 billion hryvnias. This situation is, first of all, due to the fact that the active phase of war has been lasting for longer than expected when the budget was being developed. Another important factor was that Ukraine uh, did not receive aid from the United States during first several months of the year, and the funding of the military equipment, shells, etc., as well as the wages for the servicemen was a bit of an issue at that point. And basically, these expenditures will be made by September. Therefore, we need to think about further investments. Let me remind you also that Ukraine agreed with the Committee of Private Creditors of Ukraine about restructuring the national debt of Ukraine. It is not the final agreement yet, but the majority of creditors will provide the agreement. We have the principal agreement with the Committee of the Creditors, and this is about $6 billion already this year, which we can redirect to defense expenditures. And this is the amount what Minister of Finance was planning for servicing the debt. But still, 500 billion hryvnias is quite a huge gap. That's why we would need to increase taxes. The question is how it will look like. The government insists on increasing the military levy from 1.5 to 5%. Also, the turnover tax 1% for military levy, introduce an excise for sweetened beverages, and establishing the limit 150 euros for parcels coming from other countries to Ukraine. This has not been finalized yet, and respectively, there are some other options. For instance, increase of VAT instead of the increase of the military levy. And the organizations which are part of the consortium are proposing to increase VAT and improve tax administration to minimize shadow schemes. The increase of VAT can compensate the necessary expenditures. Of course, we can debate saying that taxes are harmful for business, etc., but we're not in the situation where we can think if we need to increase taxes or not. As a matter of fact, we need to fund defense. The question is only how to do that with the least harm. So, also regarding improvement of tax administration and minimization of shadow schemes, at the moment, the government does not focus on this. Instead, they're trying to increase taxes for the payers who pay taxes anyway. The Ministry of Finance think this option is more socially justified because additional taxation will be the burden for those who can afford that. And VAT will be just the same for all the citizens. If we increase VAT for foods, then some vulnerable populations will suffer from that, and it will be not just. But for that, there are various social guarantees and social aid. And so here there are some options on how to prevent severe social consequences. In any case, in 2024, we need additional funds for defense, and we need these funds fast. So this issue should be solved by September. Otherwise, starting September, there will be interruptions in payment to the servicemen. And we actually discussed that at the previous meetings, that when we had no military assistance, military aid. Another potential solution is $50 billion at the expense of Russian assets. They may allow us either to pay for the military equipment abroad or to compensate European countries for their aid to Ukraine. This could be a good opportunity to support Ukraine. Regarding the next years, another big question is if we are able to cover the gap, the fiscal gap. We discussed that at the previous monitoring meetings. For 2025, we need at least $32 billion for civil expenditures. This is less than this year, 37 billion, also because the government wants to mobilize internal revenues by decreasing dependence on international partners, but also gradually the government is planning to Basically, they're going to reduce the amount of expenditures provided by the international partners for civil expenditures and to increase the share of Ukrainian debt. For this year, 12.5 billion euros have been confirmed from the EU and almost $2 billion from the IMF. The shortfall, as we know, is at least 17 billion US dollars because we don't know for sure if we will have the full amount from the United States, if other countries will provide any assistance. The geopolitical situation is quite difficult. Therefore, we need to look for other options. And as I said, potential solution is to get $50 billion from Russian foreign assets. These funds are based on a certain procedure can be hopefully available in 2025. We discussed in what form these funds will be provided, in the form of a grant or a loan, and whether they will be meant only civil expenditures or for defense expenditures as well. Will it be based on Ukraine's ability to meet certain commitments? But the main question is if these funds will be available at all in 2025. Previously, Ukrainian society was hoping that we'll be able to get these funds in the end of this year, and they will be fully available in 2025 for us to be able to fund budgetary expenditures. Now we don't have such confidence, and the Prime Minister Shmyhal has said that it's very important to have these funds in 2025. We don't know if the partners manage, I mean G7 partners, if they manage to find an agreement on the conditions for allocating these funds for us. But we need to know that by the beginning of the 2025. And this is important for both civil expenditures and defense expenditures. And in any case, for the next year, it is planned to reduce civil expenditures, and the budget declaration for 2025-27 has been approved, which prioritizes defense expenditures. And in terms of other expenditures, they will have to be reduced even compared to 2024, because the situation is very complicated, and we're not clear if we manage to fund sustainably next year what we planned, including defense and civil expenditures. It has been, and it is very important to prioritize defense expenditures, and this will be obviously done by the government. But of course, the civil expenditures, our social commitments, such as wages for people working in health and education, this is still very important. And we need to do everything possible to increase the amount of funding as much as possible. And it's very important to, therefore, to meet all the commitments Ukraine has assumed. Commitments to the G7, to the United States. The situation is complicated, and we must not worsen the situation. we can see that while we are meeting the requirements and commitments on time or with a delay, if we have some delays, the IMF are helping us and agreed to postpone certain deadlines. But still, as we mentioned today, for some indicators, the decisions are made almost on the last day of a month. That's why we need to do it in a timely manner. It is very important. It's important to work on all the commitments well in advance, on time, because this year and the next year, the situation with the fiscal gap is very complicated. And it's really important to mitigate it as much as possible. And this is all from my side. Thank you very much, Maxim. Before we start Q&A session, I would like to make a few remarks. The situation is difficult. It remains difficult and will be difficult next year. And when we're speaking about the fifth review of IMF program, it is likely that the indicators for 2025 budget will be reviewed. And this depends on the conditions mentioned by Maxim. We can see the ideas from the Minister of Finance in terms of also from businesses, from the experts. And we understand that the government should find certain balance when they decide to raise the taxes. Because it is planned to receive 340 billion hryvnias from the increased taxes, and this will be the addition to the fiscal gap Maxim has mentioned. This is really, really important. And one of the parameters in terms of the fifth review, I'd like to mention the macro prognosis. And IMF macro prognosis is different from the expert projections. So IMF will be changing the macro projection and the gap may increase. That's why this decision about 50 billion from Russian assets is very important. That's why the United States are expecting EU to freeze Russian assets without any terms, but this is a difficult decision. Please, colleagues, ask your questions in the chat or raise your hands. So far, we have some questions in the chat. I will ask Alona to answer. The question is, can you specify what methodologies or standards are used to monitor environmental indicators? Well, actually, there is the improved document of European Commission related to Ukraine's facility, and it includes the list of all indicators. And apart from that, the clear description of what has to be done to reach the indicators. So we are guided by the document of the European Commission and by the decisions of our government. There is certain schedule for the bills to be adopted and put into effect. And this is what we are tracing. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to add what we've mentioned at the previous meetings. As Alona said, it means that implemented or not implemented, the law is effective or not. But besides, we have what we need to do as a part of our aspiration to become the EU member. And here we need to meet the directive requirements. These are parallel processes, but at the same time, one law can be approved for Ukraine to get the funds through Ukraine's facility, but at the same time, it may not fully correspond to EU directives and require certain amendments to the laws. We need to consider that, and I think in the future it will be very important. Please, colleagues, raise your hands, but I have another question to Vyacheslav with regard to the chamber. I know that your institute is dealing with this reform. Can you explain our listeners why this reform is so important and what are your estimations? Well, actually, in terms of developing the new draft bill, I think the work has started in the beginning of the summer, and there are very lively discussions related to all important points, which completely reload auditing chamber operation. As a part of the memorandum, we committed ourselves to approve this law by December this year. I hope it will happen. But here still there is a question in terms of the current content of the chamber, the head of the auditing chamber. As far as we know, the parliament, contradicting the position of the international experts, appointed the head and a few members of the chamber. But we do hope that the new law, which will reload the activities of the auditing chamber, will improve it. Because unfortunately, not only for citizens, but also for members of parliament, the activities of the auditing chamber is quite unclear. At the same time, I think we need to pay more attention to this important body, which audits how the budget funds are spent. That's why we hope, as we promised by December of 2024, the respective law will be approved. Thank you very much. I would like also to know that the auditing chamber works on behalf of the members of parliament, but members of parliament quite often don't know what these entities are needed for. I would like also to add that every slide and every indicator is prepared by different organizations in this presentation, and we have the common structural benchmark for all. And the benchmark which has been reached is the law on ASB. But I would like to ask Maxim, is it the reform or is just a vision of further steps? And how IMF is going to supervise this? Thank you. It's a good question because it demonstrates that it is important not only to reach certain benchmarks blindly, but also to understand why it is needed for and what and that it may go beyond these benchmarks. For instance, benchmark 23 in IMF program. At the same time, it corresponds to the indicator 8.3 in Ukraine's plan. Both are saying that the law on Economic Security Bureau should be effective. In June, the draft bill was approved also by international partners, and it was signed by the president. So the law has become effective. It looks like everything's fine. The indicator has been reached. We're receiving funds. The IMF benchmark has been completed, and this is also good. And if the rest goes well, then there will be good next review. But the law is effective, but ESB remains the same ESB. Then the independent professional manager should be appointed, and the reform process should start. The management should be changed. All the officers should be certified. There must be the commission consisting of 6 members, including international partners, representatives, who will be overseen so that the restart of ESB was not formal. So yes, we have completed the indicator, but the reform is not completed yet. And of course, this reload should take place. For economic safety, it's a cornerstone organization, which you can see in its name. The reform has not been completed. And actually, this is quite true to many other indicators. So what is written in the IMF program or EU program, these are just the points we need to reach to get funding, but then we need to make further steps, which may not be written in the programs. But for us, it's very important to make these steps because our economic development depends on that in the future. Thank you very much. I will skip one question and then I will get back to it. I have another question to you. The question is about tax benefits revision or local taxes. And what should communities do in this regard? Tax benefits, yeah, this is the benchmark of IMF. Yes, that's true. If I'm not mistaken, the deadline was shifted, was postponed. We were supposed to reach it earlier, but now the IMF gave us some time to accomplish that. I don't know at the moment if this if the if this will be related to the government's review with regard to local taxes. I think it won't, because here there is a borderline what the government can do. And the last year, let me remind you, the government redirected the funds from the military salaries from the local to central budget to the national budget. And respectively, it is not likely that the government will take such a responsibility in the future and revise tax benefits in the local taxes. But still, there is time this year to do that, and we will see how it goes. I personally cannot say it clearly, but I think it won't be revised. I would like to add here, in terms of this benchmark, it is about the analysis of tax benefits. What Alona has said, apart from coming into force of certain regulatory documents, both in Ukraine's plan, in IMF program, there are quite interesting indicators, such as the study, research, analysis of the budget declarations of the previous years. And for tax benefits, again, it's about the study. And then based on the results, there will be certain recommendations which will influence the decisions. With regard to tax benefits, it's not about cancellation of tax benefits, but it's about tax for real estate property, tax for land, etc. I think the analysis, the assessment will be related to these issues. And there will be the question if the budget declarations have the funds for 579 program for people who suffered from military aggression, etc. The benchmark in the program was about preparation of the concept on the revision of 579 program. So the concept has been prepared, and we've got the support from all the governmental bodies and from IMF. But unfortunately, the text of this concept note was not published. We did not see it. However, the budget declaration includes items which will be funded. It's hard to say how the program will be changing, but in IMF program, it is stated that these changes will be aimed to support small and medium businesses so that the big businesses were not getting this aid. And the question is about what does it mean, the customs reform by October? Let me show it to you. This is the new benchmark. And these changes are saying that the state customs service will be subordinate to the Ministry of Finance as before. Also, it is about modernization of the customs office. Two draft bills are registered, which correspond to the requirements of the memorandum. And I think these two draft bills should be approved. And also going back to what Maxim was saying about ESB, in both places, in the customs service and in the ESB, there must be the contest to appoint the head, the manager of the organization. Of course, it should be transparent, but also there should be the best, the most professional candidates. And therefore, the government of Ukraine, the parliament, should enable the new leader to reload the organization and to start the new processes and approaches to operation, because maybe some good people may not come to the context if they are not confident enough. And therefore, the final outcome should be the quality work of this new person. As well, this is about building trust between the new head of the entity and the government. Colleagues, if you have any questions, please raise your hands or write your questions or comments in the chat. We don't see any more questions in the chat box. Good afternoon. If you could introduce yourself. My name is Inna Zablotska, Institute for Economical and Legal Studies. I'm a director of Lugansk branch. Yeah, that's it. So I wanted to just clarify one thing. Do I understand it right? The benefits related, which IMF is interested in. Do you remember we had some special modes of having business? This is Article 415. You remember Kiev School of Economics was doing some research, some feasibility study for such tax benefits, as well as Institute for Strategic Research. It means it is needed to see if these benefits are effective and feasible, right? I mean, economics and cost effectiveness, if they will be useful or not. Do I understand it correctly? Maxim, will you start answering? Well, basically, the review of the tax benefits should become a step to expand the internal revenues without raising the main taxes. But still, we mentioned that we will have to increase taxes. Initially, it was about the revision of tax benefits without increasing taxes. Now it will be the additional tool. Alexandra mentioned that the revision of tax benefits should estimate how much funds the state loses from all tax benefits available and to propose the activities to avoid such losses. This will, of course, not be related to all tax benefits, but we need to identify which of them generate losses or have some very little economic effect. Thank you, Maxim. Thank you very much. I wanted to add to what Maxim has said. It's clear that even now we have a lot of tax benefits. Some of them will be cancelled. For instance, cancellation of VAT for certain components, which are military, some military equipment is made out of. The majority of benefits will not be cancelled, but to cancel some of them, we need to have the list, we need to make an assessment. Previously, different organizations were performing such analysis, but the legislation has changed a little bit. That's why I think the new assessment should be made. And I think this will be really needed to increase budget revenues. Thank you, Inna, very much for your question. And with regard to local taxes and levies, the local authorities now have the right to retain some of them. And this will be not related to local revenues, right? It's up to communities. Well, basically, yes. The benefits, even involving local taxes, are included in the budget declaration. Actually, in some cases, maybe local communities will have to face some cancellations because in the budget declaration says that 5 points on the list next year will be cancelled. And maybe for that, certain benefits will have to be cancelled as well. And now we've approached the end of our today's agenda. If there are no more questions, let me thank everyone for being present at our meeting. In the chat, there is a link to the presentation, but we will also email the link to all of you. The English version of the presentation will be available next week on our website. I wish everyone a very good and quiet day. Thank you. Thank you very much. Goodbye.